Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. This week we go to Antigua, Guatemala for a global activist conclave gathering reformers from all corners of the world. In the second half of our show, we'll talk with Daniel Raisbeck, a classics professor from Bogota, Colombia, who's launched a movement to end the drug violence in his war-torn country. Up first, we have Wayne Layton, professor of economics at the Universidad Francisco Marroquin and executive director of the Antigua Forum, our hosts here in Guatemala. Wayne, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Wayne, we're here in beautiful Antigua, Guatemala. It's been an amazing 3 days. I want to have you on the show to talk about the Antigua Forum and what's been accomplished here over the years. But I'd like you to lay some groundwork first. What are we doing in Guatemala?
Well, we're meeting at a beautiful house in a beautiful hotel in Antigua. The home is owned by Universidad Francisco Marroquin. Mm-hmm. It's a university in Guatemala City. It was established over 40 years ago. In the height of conflict, Guatemala went through a 36-year civil war. Marxist guerrillas, right-wing guerrillas.
The usual horrors.
The usual horrors that we've seen throughout Latin America. And it was terrible. Tremendous amount of killing, tremendous amount of hatred on all sides. And a business leader, an entrepreneur, a visionary, a teacher by the name of Manuel Ayau, known as Musso to his friends, he decided to establish a university.
Of all things, in the middle of a war, he's going to start a university.
Yes, because he's thinking about training the future generation. He's thinking about the leaders of his country.
Talk about the pedagogy at UFM. I've been there to visit. It's quite an extraordinary place.
Well, we'll start with the mission of the university, which is very clear. The mission is to teach and disseminate the ethical, legal, and economic principles of a society of free and responsible individuals. I've taught at the university on 2 different occasions, living here in Guatemala, and I can tell you that thinking, that philosophy, permeates not only the president and the board of directors, of course, also the deans, the professors. You see it at the secretarial help. Everyone is thinking about how do we advance this mission. They take it quite seriously. And it really goes from there into pedagogy. So just living the principles, trying to change the world by teaching young people. And today it's much more Socratic practice, helping the student learn to be a learner rather than one professor standing in front of all the students and telling them, I speak, you listen, you take notes. Much more involved, much more responsibility to the students, helps them grow up, become responsible and free individuals.
And the philosophy draws a straight line from the Enlightenment through the market liberals and the great economists we know from the 20th century. Talk about that a little bit.
So if you're thinking about the Scottish Enlightenment, and even before that, the great Spaniards, the scholastics that were a century or more ahead of the Scottish Enlightenment, you see both these thinkers on the walls of the university, not just Adam Smith, but going back to the Spaniards.
I've had a chance to speak at the campus. It's quite a beautiful site. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Universidad Francisco Marroquin has about 3,000 students, a number of programs that range from medicine and dentistry to architecture to nursing, psychology, business, law, and all of the students have to take courses in the principles of economics, 2 courses in the fundamentals of economics in their first year of study, and 2 courses in philosophy related to a free society. So it's giving them the groundwork, whether they're going to go on to become a lawyer or a doctor or whatever they're going to do. And this entrepreneurial thinking that the founder of the university brought is seen at every level of the university and in every program. Just to give you one example, we have a new program started at UFM, and it is for those young people who are interested in going on becoming entrepreneurs. So it's giving them a lot of training in the thinking of entrepreneurship. Business startup, these kinds of things
Financing.
that you need. So it's finance and accounting and all the things you need, plus how to think about starting a business, growing a business, all of those things. We also have entrepreneurial engineering or business engineering, which focuses on young people who want to have a little bit more science and math because maybe they're going to be running a business or a factory or something like that, and they need that kind of training as well.
So it's training both the business leaders and political leaders of tomorrow here in Guatemala.
Absolutely, and that was the vision for the university from the very beginning, is to train those people who are going to change Guatemala. The tuition is not cheap by Guatemalan standards by any means, although they do have a very impressive scholarship program called the ITA program in Spanish, and it's basically advancing academic talent. and it focuses on those young people who have the intellectual capacity to come and not the financial means. And it basically covers all of their tuition and room and board and gives them a small stipend because some students are simply so
come
poor
from the impoverished parts of the country.
Their parents can't afford to let them come.
So how did the Antigua Forum come about?
Antigua Forum came about from a conversation in 2010. The president of the university and some of the board members and some foundation representatives were talking about most conferences that they go to, academic conferences, political conferences, business conferences, they all seem to have the same format. And they all seem to share something in common, which is people come, they talk, they discuss ideas, they go home, they pat themselves on the back for having a very interesting conversation, and nothing happens.
Right.
The Antigua Forum was designed specifically to be a different kind of conference where people come and talk about their plans to reform something, to change something that's going to advance human well-being through liberty, and they go through a process whereby they see what they're stumbling with, see what they're having trouble overcoming.
Work sessions.
It's work sessions, and they go through a whole process where at the end of the day, they leave with something in hand to go home, a strategy to make their project happen.
And you seem to draw a lot of people from all over the world, not just who have projects, but who are willing to provide free consulting to the folks who are launching these programs.
You're actually hitting on the secret sauce of the Antigua Forum, which is people and process. The people from all over the world, their background is in entrepreneurship or in political reform. A few people are political strategists, experts in communication. We've Nobel laureates, a few great thinkers on the side, but especially these entrepreneurs who are disrupting some kind of business model, thinking outside of the box, and these political reformers who want to do something within the system, people working outside the system, people working inside the system. When you put those two different kinds of people together, great things happen.
As an observer, it's the most diverse group I've ever been in when it comes to nationality, areas of business, kinds of business, race, religion, and the least diverse when it comes to philosophy and economics. We all seem to be on the same page on that one. It's quite electric.
We don't have a specific litmus test to come, but you do need to be interested in reform or advancing something that's going to change the world through liberty.
I've heard many people call it the free market Davos.
We like that line.
Wayne, dig us a little deeper into the forum process.
Okay, so I mentioned that the secret of the success is people and process. The process is essentially unconference, or you might think of it as like a continuous coffee break. So I mentioned these sessions, you go to all these other events, and there's one panel, another panel, and then you go to a coffee break, and there was the guy from the first panel. He was amazing, and you talk to him for 10 minutes during the coffee break, then the bell rings, and you got to go back to another long, boring session. That was the most productive 10 minutes of your entire 3-day weekend.
Yep.
We want to replicate that. Multiple
Turn it around.
Coffee breaks with multiple productive conversations with people you select. And that's part of the secret of our success in terms of this process, in terms of this format.
There's also a bit of a marketplace involved in terms of the ideas.
Absolutely. So we start off very much self-organizing. So what we do is we start with people who have brought a project to the Antigua Forum. They pitch it. They pitch it in front of everybody who's there.
It's like any startup competition I've ever been to.
It's just like in Silicon Valley or a startup, and you're pitching this, and you have a strict 3-minute time limit, and we ring a bell and pull you off the stage, and somebody else comes up and does that, and after everybody's pitched, we break and we self-organize. Who wants to work with this person? Who wants to work with that lady over there? You break in based on the project they just pitched. Who could bring some
value to this project?
And you self-organize and say, I can help her over there, and you go to her project, or I can help him over there, and you help the project where you think you can do the most good, you can add the most value. We check back in throughout the day to see where people are. We have little mini sessions or mini presentations where people can share knowledge and say, here's a skill I've learned, or here's a story I can share with everybody. And we take it back. And over a course of 2 days of hard work, people are expected to identify the problem they have, brainstorm different ways to overcome that problem, pick a strategy, and actually develop an action plan for that strategy. Here's what I'm going to do at 8 a.m. on Monday morning when I get back to my home country, after perhaps a 30-hour flight.
And then stuff actually happens.
And stuff happens.
So Wayne, you've described the Antigua Forum and its amazing people and process. What are some of the countries who have sent participants?
So this year we had about 50 people from all over the world. Just this year, people came from Australia, New Zealand, China, Nepal, Slovakia, and Germany, and Spain, South Africa and Morocco from Africa, and from Latin America, Mexico, and El Salvador, and Panama, and Ecuador. Also from North America, Canada. We always get a few people from the United States.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's fun just sitting around telling stories with these people because their experiences are so different.
What's really important to note is their experiences are very different, but there's usually a common theme of there's something I have to overcome, and I have to sell my reform. I have to build coalitions. I have to make friends and influence people. Whatever it is you have to do, there's somebody who's done something very similar halfway across the planet.
And let's learn from his mistakes.
Absolutely. We learn from mistakes. We think we can learn a lot from failure, and we do not shy away from that. Tell me about some place you failed, some way you screwed up a reform, and we take a lesson from that.
You've been at this for 4 years. Give us some examples of projects in the past that have moved forward.
Sure. So a couple of years ago, we had a gentleman come from Pakistan, and he was very involved, very successful doctor, and he was doing work with young people in Pakistan. Why? Because the illiteracy rate is through the roof in that country. And he realizes that literacy breeds, ignorance and violence, and we're talking about Pakistan here.
Right.
So, big deal. He has developed a program called the Speed Literacy Program. And in the course of about a year, he can take young people who obviously know how to speak Urdu and teach them to read and write at middle grade level, and teach them English at primary grade level in 1 year.
What's his secret?
It's an amazing pedagogical technique that focuses on the young people knowing the words, and they have a vocabulary in their mind. And they just need to see it on paper. And so it focuses on very special pedagogy that is only a couple of hours a day, 2 or 3 hours a day. Why? For the same reason we see in a lot of poor countries. The young people have to work.
Sure.
Their parents have demands on them.
Yep.
And so this gentleman came with having influenced the lives of a few dozen young people. And he wanted to know how to take it to scale.
How to scale it up here.
Absolutely. Yep. How do I take this to scale? I need to affect tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of young people in Pakistan.
And what did he take away from the Antigua Forum?
He took away basically a business strategy. He's a nonprofit, but it was a business strategy. He talked with entrepreneurs from the United States. He talked with education specialists who had worked in India and other developing countries and said, okay, here's how you deal with having very few resources, having teachers who aren't paid a lot, having students who don't have a lot of time. Here's how you replicate this. And it was a strategy essentially to be very mobile, and then to find different model schools, and then take that to different regions, also reaching out to some political leaders in the education department, and that's a very delicate thing you have to balance. But how do you do that so you can reach private schools and public schools and basically young people with very limited means, and scale it from just a few young people in one region to the whole country?
Give us another example from a past forum.
Sure. So in the past couple of years, we've had a gentleman come who played a key role as a budget director in the state of Michigan. And Michigan, like a lot of states, has a lot of public employees who have pensions, who have health care.
Right, a lot of unfunded liabilities.
Unfunded liabilities. The taxpayers have to pay these obligations over many, many years. When he came to us, he was in the process of going from defined benefit to defined contribution plans. How do you do that? How do you reach out to a broader number of public sector workers throughout the state? And looking at a strategy, he basically came up and honed his strategy. He knew what he wanted to do when he came here, but he walked away with a better strategy for how to communicate with some people, including some who would be hostile at first.
Sure, how to deal with the constituencies.
Different constituencies, some who, the taxpayers very much want to see this happen. And then the public sector workers who may feel threatened by this. But of course, if you do a reform right, you're helping everybody. And these people who are public sector workers, for example, need to know that if you do the reform wrong or not at all,
right, they're going to go bust.
You go bust and there will be nothing to be paid.
Right.
We know this can happen because Detroit.
Yeah, we've seen it happen.
Michigan has an example close to home.
Yeah.
So he was basically working on a strategy for selling these ideas, communicating these ideas, working with coalitions, all of the things you need to do to build and sell an effective reform.
And what were some of the projects this year?
So we had a number of projects this year from all over the world. One gentleman who was absolutely fascinating had come last year with a project, and he returned this year. That's very rare for us. He came last year trying to do something in his home country of Panama. And he's a businessman, very involved in the free trade zone. And he grew up next door to the free trade zone, a very poor area.
There's some tremendous disparities in Panama.
He refers to these disparities as Hong Kong and Haiti.
Next door.
Hong Kong next door to Haiti.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that? The Hong Kong area is the free trade zone. Next door to that is an area so poor that Hollywood goes there to film and call it Haiti. Okay, it looks so bad. That's how poor they are. And he wants to bring the benefits of a free trade zone, the economic growth, the economic opportunity, to that neighboring area where he grew up. So last year, his goal was, how do I sell this to politicians? And there were 3 different political parties and candidates running for president. And he developed a strategy to present this to everybody.
Get it in their platform.
Exactly. He wasn't going and saying, I'm with this party.
He's not a partisan.
Wasn't a partisan. I would like for all of you to be interested in doing this. All of them acknowledged it.
And he honed his story here at
He
the
honed
Antigua
his story
Forum.
at the Antigua Forum, and that was January of last year, January 2014. An election happened several months later, and the gentleman who won, the new president of Panama, very much decided that he wanted to do this. It's called Colón Puerto Libre. And shortly after that, the president of Panama needed to put somebody in charge of this effort, make a general manager. He chose the guy who had been at Antigua Forum trying to sell this idea.
He's now the dog who caught the bus.
He is the dog who got the bus. I told him that at the event. I said, now you got to learn to drive this bus. And he's building a coalition to work with the local politicians.
Sure.
We got the president of Panama who's very interested in doing this. He sees the benefit of economic growth. But you have everything from...
Now you got to get the mayor on board.
You got to get municipal leaders. You got to get civic leaders, municipal politicians, civic leaders. You probably have to reach out to gang members and of course the churches. So there's all these different folks who need to understand. A lot of stakeholders. And they need to understand the benefits of what this free trade zone could do for them because they're tremendous.
I was intrigued by a gentleman from India who's working on teacherless classrooms. How did you meet him?
So Sugata Mitra from India was introduced to us by another Antigua Forum alum who is also an educational pioneer in the United States. His name is Jeff Sandifer. And Jeff has been on your show before,
I
believe.
remember Jeff.
Yes.
Yeah, very impressive man.
Very impressive fellow who's done very entrepreneurial work in education. First with an MBA program for entrepreneurs.
The Acton
MBA, and later the Acton Academies.
K through 12.
That's K through 12. It's very impressive. It's not teacherless, but it's almost
Socratic.
Montessori. It's very Socratic, and it's for K through 12. So looking around the world, Jeff has seen who are the best minds in this kind of teacherless classroom. He came across Sugata Mitra. He's known him for some time. He's had him to Austin, Texas, where his school is, and he said, "Wayne, you gotta meet Sugata Mitra."
This guy.
So we look into who is this fellow. Well, not only has he done these interesting schools, he's been doing this for a long time. He is the gentleman who did this famous hole-in-the-wall experiment, where there's a computer placed in a wall and a camera that's hidden, and basically nobody's there. Turn the kids loose, see what they do. Watch them learn how to use it and watch them teach other kids. And you realize peer-to-peer learning is a very powerful thing. Now, of course, this fits very much with the Antigua Forum format, where we have really smart people come from all over the world with very different ideas about how to change their countries, very different projects to change their countries. And they self-organize and they go off and they work in these different projects with facilitators who are guiding them through the kinds of projects that can change the world. This is exactly what Sugata's been doing with young people.
We'll have to have him on a future show. He was quite an impressive fellow, and I think he picked up a $50,000 pledge at dinner last night.
Sugata has many different projects, and one of the things he said while he was at the event was, well, I have a project that was based on winning a TED Prize, and that money will be running out, and I need $100,000. I need to raise $100,000 in order to continue this project. It runs schools in the poorest parts of India. Very little guidance. Again, the peer-to-peer learning. I need $100,000. That was announced on Saturday. He wasn't fundraising. He was
Right.
looking for a strategy.
Ideas of where he could go.
Ideas for how to communicate to the world that this is something you need to be funding. That was the strategy he was trying to develop with us. Just so happens that at the end of the forum, we were pleased to announce he has a pledge. We can raise $50,000.
There's a match.
There's a match.
Wayne, I spent some time with a young man from Colombia who we're going to have on for the second half of the show. How did you run into him?
We come across people through a variety of networks. We have alumni all over the world. We have friends all over the world. And in this case, this young gentleman had bumped into one of our professors at an event. They got to talking. This professor realized this young man is articulate. He's passionate about something that is very important.
An awfully challenging problem.
And he's picked an awfully challenging problem, which is drugs in, of all places, Colombia.
Yeah.
And it's important when we look for people, we're looking for, a commitment to, free markets, a commitment to freedom, and commitment to improving human well-being. And one of the things he was very motivated about was education. And another one was the drug war in Colombia.
Yeah.
Because of the violence, because he had lost a family member from that. I spoke to him. This is something we do at Antigua Forum. We speak to the people who may want to come and bring a project. You just don't step off the plane and pitch a project. And we interview them and we talk about what they're trying to do. And we realize he's trying to change Colombia. He's trying to expand freedom there and also cut down on the violence.
He's bitten off quite a bit.
He's bitten off quite a bit. And he realizes that you need to change the rules of the game. I mentioned earlier the political reformers and the entrepreneurs in the Antigua Forum. He's thinking entrepreneurially, but he realizes he also has to engage the politicians.
Sure.
And that's a lot of what the Antigua Forum is about, is this intersection between thinking like an entrepreneur and thinking like a political reformer. Where those two come together, that's a sweet spot where you can change the rules of the game to improve society.
So, Wayne, what are your thoughts for the Antigua Forum in the years ahead?
We intend to continue attracting entrepreneurs, politicians, the best of the best. We want people to know that this is the place to come if you want to do something. It's for people who want to get things done.
Real activists.
As opposed to those other conferences, some of which you've heard of that are very popular. At Antigua Forum, people come to do reforms or advance a project that is going to improve human well-being, and they're going to walk away with an action plan.
And does the forum have enough support going forward to make this mission come true?
So we've been running for 4 years now with the support of some very generous foundations, and that money will eventually run out. They want to see us become self-sustaining. This is a challenge. Why? Because certainly the entrepreneurs can pay their way to Guatemala, and they can help cover some of the costs. But we're bringing reformers from all over the world, a government minister from a developing country, somebody with an interesting project to change education in India or in Thailand or Nepal. We had somebody from Nepal this year, and these folks cannot pay their way and pay the cost of the forum. So we need both
sponsors.
We need sponsors, and we need entrepreneurs who are willing to come and pay their way and the way of someone else.
Wayne, good luck with the forum, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks very much, Bill.
That was Wayne Layton, Executive Director of the Antigua Forum, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. To send us comments and feedback on this or any of our past shows, visit realclearradio.org and click on the email Bill link. Real Clear Radio Hour is a partnership with Real Clear Politics, which the New York Times has called an invaluable tool for anyone interested in politics or public affairs. Ahead, we hear how a young teacher of Latin and Greek classics grew tired of the drug war consuming his country, deciding to launch a movement dedicated to ending the drug violence Americans' appetite for cocaine and its suppression has visited on Colombia. Stay tuned.